For those of you who don't know much about Keyhubs, we've been in the business of making the invisible visible. Many of you know us for this specialty of coming into organizations and mapping human networks and dynamics. And we could see, like in year two, the purple and pink team are more integrated. The green team's still kind of on the periphery, so we understand where there might be more work that is needed. And we've done this kind of work even inside like leadership academy cohorts, where there's a desire to create greater connectivity across the organization and greater trust within, say, a leadership cohort. And so what we would do is we'd use our Keyhubs methodology and software and visualization to look at what does the trust network look like today. And if we take that group through an experience over, say, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, has our programming worked? Have we done the right things to create a more connected cohort, one that is grown in trust and inspiration? And so these are some of the things that we've done over the course of the last decade. We've had the pleasure of working with a lot of really great brands here locally in the Twin Cities and beyond, where we've done this kind of work. Now, 3-4 years ago, I was invited to do a TEDx talk on this topic of informal networks. And following that, I started to do a lot more keynote speaking. And as I started getting up in front of more audiences, spreading the gospel of informal networks and mapping networks, I was really craving a way to give my audiences a Keyhubs experience in the moment. And that's what gave birth to this new next generation version of Keyhubs that we've been working on for the past several years and really just started rolling out in the last couple of years. And we're super excited about it because we can do Keyhubs in the moment with a captive audience. It's 100% hands-on participation. It's in the moment. It's fully customizable. And we like to believe that it's fun, it's meaningful, and it's more engaging than a traditional survey. What we've attempted to do with this new product, which we call Keyhubs Matrix, is bring together different types of assessments. Now, most people here have probably experienced something like Strengths Finders, Myers-Briggs, Insights. These are all very powerful, self-reported assessments. They have their place. It also doesn't tend to include 360 feedback. And so there's this whole other world of getting feedback from your peers on how you're showing up. It's also very powerful, but it's different than a self-reported tool. Now, Keyhubs, we as an organization have been focused really on network dynamics and mapping influence and understanding how teams are working together. And what the Matrix does is it brings together elements of all of these into a unified, elegant experience that's in the moment. And what we're most excited about with the Matrix is we've designed it in a way that is easily transferable or licensable to others. So we have this growing community of partners, many of whom are on the call today. Welcome. What I'm going to do is talk about a case study that I did using the Matrix with a conference called Spark The Change. It's focused on agile project management, so it attracts a lot of people in the agile world. And last year, in the midst of the pandemic, Spark The Change Montreal invited me to use the Matrix to map how the networks in this virtual environment shifted over a 1-month period. And they wanted to see, like, is what we're doing changing how people are connecting to one another and how they perceive one another? So this axis was actually designed by my contact at Spark Montreal, Francois. He's part of the community. I was hoping he'd be here today, but wasn't able to make it. But their whole theme for Spark The Change, this was last April, it was a virtual conference, was moving from ego to eco and moving from isolation to connection. So there were probably 70 people at this conference over the course of this 4-week experience. And we had them all self-identify, like, where are you right now along these polarities? So we got to see where they were. And then this was on April 8th, so early in the month. And then we reevaluated after they had a series of experiences over this 2-week period from the 8th to the 22nd of April. And what was cool is we could see this progression of people feeling more connected, feeling a little more eco. And then we fast forward to the end of the month, April 28th, and you can kind of see the progression on how people were feeling. So the conference organizers, for Francois in particular, was feeling like, hey, like the interventions that we're doing, the workshops, the mixers that we're doing seem to be having an impact on our attendees. And so that was really fun to watch. And we, of course, shared this back with the whole conference at the end of the conference. We can look at the average rating, and you can kind of see that progression over that 3 to 4 week period. Things are moving in the right direction. We also looked at their aspiration at the beginning. So this was on April 8th, April 22nd, April 28th. So not a lot of shift there in those first 2 weeks, but like towards the end, their aspiration even moved more towards the connected eco sides of the chart. Now, we also did the 360 with everyone, where, because we wanted to understand the networks of everyone present at this conference. And we wanted to know, like, what are self-perceptions versus other perceptions? This is where the perceptions were on April 8th, the start of the conference. And you can see, like, there's not, looking at all the blue dots, you can't really see the progression. But when we look at the averages, right? So this was the average perception. Again, people giving others more credit than they're giving themselves, kind of like what we saw earlier. But so in general, the perceptions didn't necessarily change that much, but self-perceptions definitely did. And so that was an interesting observation. Now, this is what the resulting network looked like at the first measurement on April 8th. And so what we see here in this, in the tapestry of this conference network, is that there's a central core network that's well connected. There's a lot of hubs, there's a lot of connections. And then there's like 3 distinct periphery parts of this conference network. You can see like kind of the 2 islands, like in the lower left and the upper right. And then there's kind of like this separated sub-network that's kind of connected to the central network, but not quite. So it's just like really interesting for everyone to be like, oh, like, so this is how we're connected and this is where we're not connected. And there are some people who really, jumped out as key hubs. Others were bridges and hubs in these little sub-networks. And then we did the measurement again, a couple of weeks later. And what we saw is that one island that was sort of connected to the larger island got more connected to the bigger island, but those 2 other sub-networks were still disconnected, although they were kind of connected to each other. And this happened intentionally because, I worked with Francois and I said, here are the people in the islands, here are the people that you're going to want to try and get into the fold or get connected to one another. And we started to see that happen through the networks. We started to see these islands get closer to the center. And even though there are still a couple of islands here, they're actually connected to one another more so than what you see here in the first iteration. And then when we go to April 28th, you see that this is a much more connected, cohesive group. There's essentially no islands. So if we look at these side by side, you can see that network connectivity progression over this 4-week period. And we were able to do that quickly, like on the fly, in the moment, and share that back in a meaningful, visual way. And so hopefully that gives you a sense of how, the tool can be used to map connectivity, understand connectivity, and other dimensions like trust and ego versus ego, whatever you decide those to be, so that you can see, is the work we're doing having an impact, and if not, what could we do differently in the moment to shift the movement of these things.